Good morning. There's a lot of talk today, and rightly so, about identity, what we identify as, and the importance of knowing who we are and not letting what somebody else says determine who we are. And I think that's a good thing. Overall, we should be questioning our identity, what our identity is in. And it's interesting because I look at myself, literally, if I look at myself, I recognize that it is hard for me to change the way I view myself. It's easier for other people, honestly, to view me possibly more accurately than I can view myself. It's been interesting becoming more, whatever you want to call it, accomplished as an ultra runner. People view me differently because of what I've achieved or the things I've done. But I still don't view myself any differently than I did when I started running. I'm not identifying in ways that other people view me, but I'm also kind of downplaying what I've done to myself too to keep me hungry and focused. But that's just one aspect. I know I had this conversation recently where kids that were raised or grew up being a little bit heavier set have a problem with viewing themselves any differently later in life. Even if they've lost the weight, they still identify or have these views of themselves as being overweight. So if I've made failures in my life or if I've made mistakes, one of the hardest things to change is how you view yourself in light of the wrong things you've done or the mistakes you've made, or even like things that, like with your weight, like that's not necessarily your fault. It's just something about you. We can still view ourselves through the lens of guilt and shame, failure, mistakes, instead of in the light of who are we working to become? Because we have all fallen short. We have all done things that if we view ourselves through that lens, it doesn't lead to growth. It leads to condemnation, shame, guilt, fear, anxiety. We should choose to view ourselves through the light of the positive things that we're doing in our life, the things that are going to lead to growth. And I think we have to believe that we can overcome. So that's not who I am, but it kind of is. If you look at I am an overcomer, that is a characteristic that I want to identify with. And I think we all have personality conflicts within us. I have an overcoming characteristic, but I also can have a lazy characteristic. We all have that fight or flight in us in every different way. I have the ability to serve my family and be loving and mindful of them, but I also have the ability to be very selfish. So just because something is in me doesn't mean I want to identify with that characteristic. I have to identify which characteristic and trait I want to identify with. Which one do I want to emphasize in my life? Which one do I want to nurture and let grow? And which one do I want to neglect? Which one do I want to call out as not ideal, right? Just because something's in me doesn't mean I need to identify with it. Does that make sense? So just because you have feelings based on mistakes you've made doesn't mean you need to identify as a failure, because life is not over. You've made a mistake. And whatever that is, whatever the failure you think is, it doesn't mean you are a failure. It means you identified with the wrong trait. We all do that. We all do that daily. And not every time it has these massive ramifications. It can just be slow little things that we give into. We make compromises with ourselves. So I think it's important to identify who you want to be and what parts of your personality traits or characteristics you want to identify with. But recognize that there is a war within you. There is an identity war within you. And sometimes you need to listen to the people around you because they can remind you. You know, people see the better sides of us than we see ourselves. So I'm not saying we need to listen wholeheartedly to everybody around us, but oftentimes people see the best in us and we struggle to see the best in ourselves. So those people that you trust in your life, listen to them. You know, God does this with us. He tells us who we are. He tells us who He made us to be. And we can either choose to listen to that and nurture those things and believe those things, even if that is a seed inside of us that needs to be nurtured and watered and bloom. It's not a lie. It's in there. Everything that we need to grow, every growth potential is in us. We just need to nurture it, identify it, invest in it, cultivate it, and let it grow. And those things that are within us that are harmful, that are not ideal, that are leading us down paths of failure, identify those things as well. And let those things die. Neglect those things. So I think it's important that we're having conversations of identity. And I think it's important that we emphasize the things in life that really matter. And I'm not saying that me being a man is not important, but it is very low on my priorities of viewing myself as a man. I could be a man with great high character that treats people well, and I could be a man that treats people like total crap. Me being a man has nothing to do with the fact that I'm either choosing to invest in the good seed inside of me, or I'm choosing to invest in the seed that's just gonna suck the life out of me and everyone around me. So consider your identity, considering in your life what you identify with, and surround yourself with people that are going to help you to see the good seeds and the good fruit that is inside of each and every one of us.